You're gonna come?
Okay, all right, thank you for joining us. I think we were able to just do introductions. Did you get to introduce yourself? Except for you, so I'll let you introduce yourself.
Sorry, I was snacking. Hello, everyone. My name is Melissa Bolden, and I am the Director of Secondary Special Education and Student Services.
All right, now that we know everyone in the space, so I just found out I'm gonna be asking and answering the questions. So we're gonna start with a process question for the panel. So who could be observing me and how will I know? Anyone want to start?
It's administrator. Your administrator would be observing you, so that could be the building principal or the assistant principal. I know the way it's organized at Penndel, we have our specific departments that we work with closely. The other part of the question is how will you know? That will be a discussion. I know for myself, I send out an email to the departments that I work closely with, just to kind of allow the individual to be observed, to give me a timeline that works for them. I give them a window of time. As first year, you will be expected to have 2 formal observation. I like to do one before December and the second after. So that's something that I would communicate and send that out as a email, like, at the beginning of the school year. So I would say, how would you know? Is that you collaborate with the individual that's observing you to set a time, because before the actual observation, you have a pre-observation meeting where you go through your lesson plan and you can kind of collaborate with the individual. I see it like as a coaching opportunity to kind of, allow a person who would be observing me to know, like, depending on what's in the lesson plan, like where your head was at, what was your thought process, and you have to collaborate with that. And then afterwards, that's it.
Anything else to add?
I would just add that depending on your discipline, sometimes you could have, well, actually it doesn't depend on your discipline. Depending on, that's the elementary thing. It'll be your building principal, but sometimes it might be a special education administrator who could do one of your observations. If you were in elementary, it could be any one of the cabinet members who might do one of your observations.
Can we say something?
Sure.
Yeah, I think several of us have probably already had observations this year. So we've already had the experience, but yeah, and if it's mostly what you said, there were some things that didn't happen, but yeah, that was it was a good experience. Yeah.
She said that's how she does it.
Yeah, no, I know. Hey, I'm not, it was, I'm not, no complaints. I mean, I'm not complaining about it. Yeah. I was like, just come back in 10 minutes. Yeah.
Hopefully it's a coaching type of experience for you. And the other piece is the formal observation is not the only time you're communicating, right? With your building administrators. Building administrators, just administrators in general, we're in and out of classrooms. So we see what's going on, and the purpose is to ensure, to support you in ensuring that our students receive what they need. But that's also, we have to provide you with some supports so that you can help the students receive what they need.
For long-term subs, I know that they're contractually we don't have to have observations. Is that true? But if we want one, I really want one. Should I request that from my principal?
Yeah.
Is it a LTS position?
Yes.
I think LDS is an LTS should.
Nobody's mentioned. That's why I was just wondering,
Yeah, so
but I didn't know.
if no one's mentioned to it,
Today, you know.
so if no one's mentioned it to you,
I should.
there's no harm in you bringing it to an administration.
Because I feel like it's beneficial for me to have one before I end my time in LTS.
The only role that would not, is my understanding, is a called PPD.
Yeah.
It's a permanent sub role,
Yeah.
but an LTS should.
Because I started I originally was a PPD and then I moved into an LTS, so I think that's why nobody's said that to me. But I think I
That
could
could be.
change it. Okay, I just want to make sure.
And you could also, Rachel, it's, you know, should have mentioned too, sometimes you'll have a curriculum.
Yeah.
So depending on your, could be as part of your team as well.
Yeah, so feel free, you can reach out to me, your building administrator. I would say, in terms of our curriculum team, similarly to cabinet on the last, I would say 5 years, we've really been asked to assist at elementary since there aren't elementary principals and some of our elementary schools are relatively large, but there's definitely been times building administrators have asked me to come in or teachers have asked me to come in. So I know we have 5 different curriculum supervisors, but if you want that lens, that's another person to reach out to as well.
Awesome, thank you.
Any other questions related to the who, what, where of observations? Okay. All right. So what is your approach as you enter the classroom for an observation?
I'll answer.
Mhm.
So depending on the building, so I think like a lot of the kids, they know who the administrators are for good, bad, and different reasons. So my goal is really to come in as quickly and quietly as possible because when the kids are like, hey, what are you doing here? And sometimes the kids' responses can make the teacher we're observing a little nervous. And that isn't the intention. So I try to kind of come in, I find a seat in the back where I'm facing, the kids are facing a staff member, and I'm in the back. So I literally want to be like a fly on the wall, like not to interrupt, not to interject, but literally to observe. But I know that sometimes while you're talking, I find the staff members are like looking at me. So I'm trying to look down because I don't want it to be an interaction between them and myself. I really want it to be an interaction with the students. So I really try to come in and even turn off my admin hat when we see a student who may or may not be doing something they shouldn't do. That's not our role. So I kind of come into the back, take some notes, and I'm just documenting. I'm kind of taking all that I'm seeing and then documenting it in real time.
Sometimes I'm a student in the room. So if I come in, because if I'm chosen to observe you, I don't know everyone. The kids don't know who I am. Sometimes they think I'm one of the students, depending on whatever. So I prefer oftentimes to sit in a student desk, be near a student, and I understand that people are nervous. I was very nervous no matter what year I was in as a teacher. Anytime I feel like someone is judging me, it makes me nervous. So I try to sit with the kids and I'll ask kids, what are you doing? How do you do that? You know, like that's what I kind of will do if I come into your classroom. I'll tell the teacher, just keep teaching. And so I often sit with the students and I'll just like sometimes walk around, but again, not to disrupt the room, but I really want to know what the kids are thinking. So students, sorry.
So that's something that like the pre-conference, you can kind of talk about the roles of both people. Like if you want the administrator to like, I know in the past when I've been about you, I like to introduce not as the administrator, but just like, oh, don't worry, they're here for me, you know, and just clear the air real quick. So is that something in the pre-conference that you just kind of talk about before the actual observation, like how you want to handle that? Please.
I just, as we were sharing earlier with our different roles, like being a curriculum supervisor and being in all 18 buildings, I obviously always have a pre-conference, and for, you know, little ones to older ones, I'm not someone that they would know for a daily, you know, I'm not at, you know, Carline every day. So that conversation is always part of it. And, you know, we have that ahead of time. But I could understand that a building admin who's there in the hallways every day, it would be very different.
I had a pretty good experience. I wanted to surprise my students because I knew he was coming, and so I incorporated project presentations into the lesson that they were presenting, and they didn't know he was coming. So we started the presentations. Well, actually, no, I had something else to the lesson, and then I called them up to present, and it was good. Like, because they were like pretty shocked and extra nervous, but like I was like, nice. You know, he gets to see what you guys are capable of, which is great. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. All right. So, what domains might be good for new teachers to focus on in their first year or years?
I would say domain 2, is to me really essential. Building that classroom environment, relationships is that first couple A and B of that domain. That's so crucial. I think those other parts of 3 probably don't happen if you don't build those relationships and rapport and build an environment that kids feel safe in, can contribute, things are managed, procedures, those types of things. The engagement, those other pieces, part domain 3, I think you're going to struggle with if you don't have a good foundation in domain 2. So I think all of it's important. That's the hard part, right? But I think definitely as a first year teacher, it's kind of establishing that, talking about that culture for learning, it's establishing that culture in your classroom, and what you want that culture to be, and the rapport relationship you build with kids. That would be definitely as a first year teacher an area of focus, sort of from my lens that I would hope to see with the first year teachers.
That's great. I would also say domain 1, like the planning and preparation. I know myself as a new teacher or new administrator or anything, I'm not good off the cuff ever, not even as an almost, 40-year-old who has had, 18 years in education. I don't do anything well off the cuff. So planning and preparation really helps me. If nothing else, to have a plan A, a plan B, know what I'm talking about, feel comfortable. So to me, I think meeting you at anything, that's like always my go-to starting place.
I think I want to marry what they do say. I think for the pre-conference, to me, the planning and prep. Because I feel like that is the crux of the conversation. Outside of the, like, how are you doing? How's it going? What's great? What's not so great? But wanting to know what you're doing inside the classroom is the pre-conference, and then during the observation, I think that's where domain 2 and 3 kind of focus on. Because you can see the rapport building, and then you can see the classroom management based on that piece. So I feel like both 3 domains help, but it's about when to focus on them. So I think most important is the planning and prep for pre-conference, and then I think most important for the actual when the observation is 2, right?
And each of the domains have like, I guess subdomain areas,
Yeah.
you could say. I think it's important to look at that too. So not necessarily just look at, oh, okay, domain 2 and then all of that, but there are parts of, like, for example, questioning is something that I love to see in instruction, because how do you know that they know? So the questioning part in regards to domain 3 is something that, year 1, year 10, year 30, that's something that's very important, because you want to be able to, assess the students that way. Like, once you have your objective and you're leading the instruction, you want to also demonstrate to the students, like, yeah, I taught you this the first 10, 15 minutes, but I'm also checking to see if you got what I was delivering as well. So I think it's also important to look at. I can't tell you which one it is from the top of my head, but it's also important to look at the domains, but kind of look at in domain 2, which one that you, like if I'm your administrator, then we'll be talking about in domain 2. Like, what area are we going to focus on? In domain 3, which area? So you probably end up focusing on 3 different things, but they're in different domains.
So when I was in school, the Danielson rubric, our professor said that you want to live in the 2s and 3s. Do you guys have a different perspective on that, or do you think that that's a good goal to have?
You can only visit distinguished, Mr. Lee, right? You can't live there.
Yeah. That's like the on stage.
Yeah, the on-stage show. That's how I learned it. The
That's
off-stage.
and then the off stage is domain 1 and
Well, I
4.
figured there's of course organizations to it, but I wanted to hear.
Yeah. So you have a lot of control in domain 1 and domain 4. That's more, you have a lot of preparation. So you can kind of like navigate that one, right? But then domain 2 and domain 3, that's when the administrators come in. That's what we're observing. That helps.
So in terms of, I don't necessarily prescribe the idea that you can't potentially live in distinguished, but if you look at the descriptors of distinguished, they're not easy.
Right.
I'd probably even think back to my teaching career. There were probably a few times I lived in distinguished in both domains 2 and 3, the ones that are on stage. That lesson I definitely was in 2, 3 and 4 all the whole time. I don't. But there's no Because I think the big difference is when you look at that differentiation between 3 and 4 is who's doing the work.
Mhm.
And the big difference is you really have to have students doing the work and the leading in domain 4. That means who's asking your questions. If I'm collecting your evidence and I'm writing teacher question, teacher question, teacher question, and it never comes up, student question was, that should be a clue that I'm probably in questioning 3B. I'm probably not in distinguished because there weren't very many formulated questions by students. The teacher generated all the questions. Even if they were great high rigor questions, students were generating. So that to me is always, and that's not an easy place to get for kids. Especially with your differentiated other tests you got in front of you. So,
No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
that's a lot.
No, I'm saying even beyond them asking questions, their level, like where are they taking it next? Where are they going? So but it's okay. It's a process. Sometimes individuals don't really get it until later. It's like you, me, being almost 50, I would say that now I think of some of the things that my mother told me, and I'm like, yeah, you're right. I get it now, so it's okay. It's okay if we come into a room and the kids are not asking all of the questions. It's fine. I mean, you learn how to do engagement. You learn how to do different things, but things will be okay. It'll be fine.
All right, so we've talked a lot about, or more about domains 1, 2, and 3. So let's talk a little bit about domain 4. Can the panel explain domain 4 and what other teachers present as evidence to maybe give some ideas to the group about what they can present to show professionalism?
I think for me, a lot of domain 4, that's always a tricky one when you come to your formal observation, because you look at that part and you're supposed to self-reflect, and you look at it and you're like, well, that particular lesson, I didn't reach out to families and engage them about that one little lesson that Neil came to observe me on. So I do encourage when we're in that pre-conference that when you do your domain 4 reflection, you are thinking more globally, like how you're setting up that cultural environment. So I want to be hearing about like, how are you engaging parents? So you're going to potentially, not that you got to pull your computer up and show me examples of your communication, but that you're talking through what are the ways I'm engaging parents, or if I'm not hearing from a parent, what are other ways I'm trying to engage with families? I'm just picking on that component. I think for those other areas, some of them come from my observation as a principal. It's a little harder, so it may be helpful for like Dr. Bolden and Rachel to share with you too, like that don't get to see you kind of in that daily operation. So Christopher's in my building. I get a sense of what his leadership, what it looks like when he's in a PLC with his other PLC members. I get a sense of what they look like when they're, reflecting about their teaching. That's real easy for me to see and kind of observe for my own to match your self-reflection. So I don't know for you guys, like when you're coming from the outside, in essence, what you would be looking for might be helpful.
Yeah, I always like to ask them about what they're involved with within their building that they're in. Some of our teachers are heavily involved in clubs or the CPE&I committee, or they chair this. So I definitely want to hear about that. I know I also want to hear, are they in school? Are they in a program? What are they pursuing? Are they volunteering for committees? We are fortunate at North Penn that we have a lot of all of that available if you want it. So that's something that I like to hear about on top of other things in there.
The day-to-day things like, morning duty, PM duty, how are you showing up, how are you interacting with your peers? How are you interacting with the students in the hallway, the more positive that I see, the higher I tend to rank. But I think of the world of education, it really is it's a team approach. So it's not only what happens in the classroom, that's a good portion of it, but then how are you contributing to the community of the building as a whole? So something as minute as, hallway duty, when we're running around and we're seeing these things, and some things that you may do may stand out, and that becomes part of that conversation as well.
All right. From your lens, what does equity and inclusion look like in the classroom, and where does it connect to Danielson?
I know.
So what does equity and inclusion look like and where does it? I would, planning and preparation. Being intentional. And sometimes in order to be intentional, I know for myself, I have to create a checklist of my considerations. So when I'm putting together a presentation or when you're putting together your lessons, and not just a lesson, but your day to day, and how does it correlate to what am I going to consider? Because if everything is just up here and not really identifying what we consider, you're more likely to miss someone or something. So I would say including it in the planning and the preparation, which will help feed into the other components.
I also want to add the classroom environment, because when I look at, CPE&I, all the work that goes into it really will shine its brightest when I'm looking at how you interact with the students, how the students interact with each other, what's deemed acceptable, what's deemed not acceptable as a whole. So when you look at, a lesson, what we're including, what are we excluding? Are we mindful of it? Are we mindful of our biases? So sometimes that might mean, being able to take accountability. Well, I didn't think about that. My apologies. Making notes of that, because we're not all perfect, in the CP&I world, but I see it the most in that relationship building with students who, feel comfortable making mistakes, adults who know that mistakes happen, and then how we bounce back from that. So the classroom environment to me where it shines the most.
All right. What are your expectations for technology as it relates to the observation?
I saw some head nods, so I guess this is a good one. People want to answer.
Technology is a tool.
Yeah, our expectation.
Like, for me, it's a tool, and it's just like any other tool in your toolbox as a teacher, and leveraging that to always enhance the learning, right? Just using technology because wow, that is really cool that I can't wait to think the Wayground did this. So it should enhance the learning, or hopefully the highest level of technology use. You're just like it's helping kids create and facilitating that piece, and it can be a huge tool also for leveling that equity and that inclusion, thinking forward. If I'm thinking and planning in advance and using technology to help me potentially differentiate and make sure all my kids can access what we're reading. But I would never oh my gosh, they decided to do that on paper. That could have been done on a Google Doc. I'm not that to if the learning outcome is achieved, all that to me that matters. Technology is just another tool to be able to do that. So I think that's from my perspective.
I would like to add that I kind of look for it, not all the time, because sometimes a teacher being willing to explore what offerings we have in our district, because sometimes we go with what we're just familiar with. And we have a great technology, educational, instructional technology department. And there are some things that they introduce to us. And naturally, sometimes if it's not preferred, sometimes being willing to take a risk and even in a pre-meeting say, hey, I want to try something different. I just want you to know this is something new I've been working on. And I really want your feedback, but just know this is something new that I'm working on. So I would, especially if you're having two observations and you do that and you say that in the pre-meeting, and you and the administrator, you know, have an understanding. The administrator might say, don't do that. But being willing to explore the things that we have because our students don't have fear of exploring. So.
I will say that I've seen a few different, or in a few different pre-conferences, teachers have said, I purposefully don't use tech with this specific exercise. I want screens down. This is why. This is what I like to use screens for, or screen breaks. So if you are, if that's a practice you utilize in your classroom, I think that would be great for the pre-conference to kind of share that philosophy with your administrator. I know that's been a little bit more common in the last couple of years as we're just talking about how much time kids are spending on the screen. So I think it's important to have the full discussion around technology. So feel free to add that if that's something you're practicing. Okay, so one of the questions, there's a couple questions on here for individuals who may have a different role or specialty role. Does anyone have a specialty role, like a psychologist or something of that nature? Okay, I don't want to waste our time on those questions, but I wanted to make sure to cover some of them in case they were, and then, you know, part of this group. Any other, we can rotate a couple more questions. We got to every category. Did anyone have any other questions that are top of mind that they're thinking of while we have about 5 minutes left? Have most of you had at least one observation or touch point at this point in time? So most, except for one that we've kind of already talked about.
The last thing I'll say is the most important part of this whole process is reflection. Like you reflecting about, that's what I want to hear in your post conference. I quite frankly am less concerned unless there's major instructional issues, and you know those are always the big caveat. Unless there's something major going on that we definitely need to address, and we'll do that. But for most of you, it really is the numbers and where you had a 2 and where you had a 3 and where you had a 4. I want to hear your reflection because that's what makes you a great teacher throughout your career. Am I constantly thinking about reflecting after each lesson? What went well? What didn't go well? Why did I choose to use technology and not use technology? What, you know, that hearing that thought process. I'm always trying to be intentional about those, like asking questions of, hey, I noticed you didn't use, you had them do paper and pencil. You didn't use technology. Tell me why. And then I want to hear like, it's, you know, I really did think about that, but then X and Z, Y, Z factor was the reasons like that's important because that tells me your thought process, your thinking, your intentional. So to me, the whole most important process is the reflection. I started, you know, if you did Dr. Golden's work, you did Dr. Golden. When I first started doing observations, I told you what I thought of your teaching before you even came to post conference. So like my observation point would say, that was an effective use of Adobe and an effective use of technology.
We have
You know, so I like already gave you my opinion, which was very so encouraged when we made that change because you aren't coming into a conference like, oh, I'm going to hear what they already think of my teaching before I even get in there. The new way is so much more rewarding for me is like loving to see where you think you are in terms of that rubric. And kind of what I was thinking, to me is so much more rewarding. Having to walk into a meeting with like, oh, I already know what they think of my teaching.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll have to convince them otherwise if I didn't think it would.
I just appreciate that we get a free conference because when I first started teaching, principal just showed up at the door and sat down like, shoot, not today. Remember that. So this is so much better.
An opportunity for dialogue too, right? Back and forth rather than just one way.
It was just a write up.
Yeah.
So I always, the interesting piece, I do it similar to Ms. Gonzalez where I'll send out an email saying, hey, I'd like to, you know, meet up with you sometime in the next 2-3 weeks, when your availability, what period you're thinking. And oftentimes I find, especially the newer teachers, they give me what they perceive as like the most focused class, right?
Mhm.
The easiest class. And I understand the desire because you're like, I want it to go this way. And, but I challenge you to pick the other class that you might be struggling most in, because now you have an allotted pre-conference, post-op conference time that we can really talk and collaborate. Because oftentimes we're getting emails and written, someone is saying, hey, I'm struggling with Johnny and da-da-da, and I'm trying to run in and observe Johnny for 10 minutes. You have this scheduled time where we can help and be a resource. So why not use it? So I understand it like, well, somebody might throw something. We get it. We know it. Don't always pick what's going to be this picture perfect. We don't, because we know picture perfect is not, it happens sometimes, but it's not always ideal. So in the non-picture perfect, that's when you're going to need the most help and support. That's what we're here for. So I challenge you, pick that difficult class. Pick that class with that difficult parent. So that way when I'm calling the parent, I can say, I sat in and I saw it. So it just helps us help you more. Because when everything went great and so the reflection is great, cool. But did you really get the most out of us as a resource? Because when else can we really say, I'd love to say I can dedicate more time, but the day-to-day gets busy, right? So if you're a first-year teacher, I'm telling you, I'm dedicating like an almost 2-hour period twice a year to just you and only you, only your needs. You is my suggestion.
Yeah, I was going to bring up that we came from a district in Virginia where a school district where you had like the set observation, but then you had surprise. You guys talked about it a little bit. You had that surprise observation, and that was always tough because it could be in your class that you would not have chosen for the administrator to come into. But it was kind of good in a way too, because then they could see, hey, these are the challenges we have in the classroom, and here it is. So yeah, it goes both ways.
When you're out of your first year, that can't happen. So you don't, like our teachers that select a focused observation, it's another option for teachers after those first few years. Sometimes we schedule them, sometimes we don't. So that can't happen if you get further down your career path.
Any other questions?
I have a question. How do you think our moderator is?
Getting it on the fly.
All right, we're good. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And there's other options too.
Yeah.
But there's like options. Yeah.
Do an assessment for the self-harm.
I think I should.
Neil, see?
What's that?
Is that in the PD that?
I know.